All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to unpack the incredible and, let's be honest, often chaotic history of something most of us use every single day: paper money. It seems so simple, right? But its story is this incredible journey of trust, technology, and, yeah, a lot of repeated mistakes.
So let's just jump right in with the biggest question there is. Really think about it. Why on earth would anyone ever agree to trade a real, heavy chunk of gold or silver for, well, a piece of paper? The answer to that question is really the story of money itself, and it all boils down to one powerful idea: trust.
So where does this all begin? Well, it starts with a really practical problem. Imagine you're a merchant back in the day, trying to do a huge deal. Lugging around coins was an absolute nightmare. They were heavy, they were bulky, and moving large amounts of them was not only expensive, but also super dangerous. Commerce needed something better, something lighter.
And that need for something better, well, that brings us right into our first chapter, from coins to confidence. And what's so cool is that we're going to see how this simple, totally brilliant idea didn't come from some king or emperor, but from the merchants themselves.
Meet flying money. So picture this. It's 7th century China, and merchants are just sick and tired of dragging these huge, heavy strings of copper coins everywhere. They came up with a clever solution. They'd leave their metal with someone they trusted and just take a paper receipt instead. These private notes were so light they got the nickname Fi Chen, or flying money. And get this was a system built entirely on trust between business people. The government had nothing to do with it. Yet.
And that little idea? It kicks off this massive, 1,000-year-long experiment in China. And, as you're about to see, it becomes this wild, dramatic cycle of incredible highs and just spectacular lows.
So let's walk through how this whole thing played out. It all starts, in the 7th century with that private flying money. Then, by 1024, the Song dynasty says, hey, good idea, and they make it official, issuing the very first government banknotes. Fast forward to the Yuan dynasty, and they go all in. They actually ban coins completely, which, spoiler alert, ends in a total disaster. And by 1455, after so many collapses from hyperinflation, the Ming dynasty just gives up. They abandon paper money completely.
You have to understand, to anyone outside of China, this whole idea was just mind-blowing. When the explorer Marco Polo showed up in Yuan China, he literally could not believe what he was seeing. He wrote that the emperor was making money from tree bark, and everyone just had to accept it. That quote just perfectly captures how revolutionary and, let's be honest, how weird this all seemed to the rest of the world.
So what went so disastrously wrong for the yuan? Well, this number right here, it says it all. Basically, the government had huge wars to pay for, so they did the easy thing. They just printed more money, and then a lot more. Without enough silver to back it up, confidence just evaporated. By 1309, the value of their money had plummeted by a mind-boggling 1,000%.
And this right here brings us to a theme that you see again and again in history. You know that saying, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes? Well, centuries later, Europe was about to learn these exact same lessons the hard way.
And this slide just illustrates that rhyme perfectly. Just look at this side by side. Okay, on the left, you've got 14th century China printing cash to fund wars, and bam, the money becomes worthless. Now look at the right. Centuries later in Sweden, Europe's very first bank starts printing notes on what they called an unlimited scale to cover their debts, and guess what? It collapses. It is the exact same fundamental mistake.
And believe it or not, this same story plays out in early America too. Have you ever heard that phrase, not worth a continental? Well, that comes straight from the Revolutionary War. The Continental Congress was printing tons of money to fund the army. Add to that the fact that the British were running these sophisticated counterfeiting operations, and the currency became so worthless that the phrase for useless is literally baked into American English.
So how did we finally break this cycle of boom and bust? Which brings us to our next big chapter, taming modern money. Because the solution wasn't some new kind of paper. It was about building new institutions to manage and protect the whole system.
So, what was the answer? It was building professional institutions. You have the Bank of England in 1694, and way later, the U.S. Federal Reserve in 1913. These places weren't just created to print money. Their job was to manage it. By making notes official legal tender and having central banks guarantee their value, governments finally started to build a more stable foundation of trust.
But, managing the supply was only half the battle. They also had to protect the notes themselves, which kicked off this constant arms race with counterfeiters. It started with simple stuff like warnings printed right on Ming Dynasty notes. Then it evolved into this super intricate art, these complex geometric patterns and fine-line engraving. The next leap was hidden tech, like the metallic threads that Great Britain started using widely in 1948. And that brings us to today, with these high-tech polymer notes, holograms, and color-shifting inks. It's a multi-layered defense system.
And make no mistake, this fight wasn't just about catching a few crooks. We're talking about national security. During World War II, the Nazis launched something called Operation Bernhard. It was this incredibly sophisticated plan to totally destabilize the British economy by flooding the country with millions of pounds in nearly perfect counterfeit bills. This was economic warfare, and it just goes to show how critical it is to protect your currency.
So all of that history brings us right up to the present day and into our next chapter, digital cash. I mean, the whole idea of physical paper money is starting to feel a little quaint, right? And our long quest for a trustworthy way to exchange value is moving into a completely new world.
So for about the last 50 years or so, most of us have been using what's called fiat money. That's just currency that has value because the government says it does, not because it's backed by a pile of gold somewhere. And this creates a really interesting trade-off. On one hand, it gives governments incredible flexibility to manage the economy. But on the other hand, it brings back that constant risk of inflation and mismanagement, the same risk we've seen again and again throughout history. Its value rests completely on trust.
And now that whole concept of trust is being moved into a brand new format, the Central Bank Digital Currency, or CBDC. So what is it? Put simply, it's a digital version of a country's official money. Think of a digital dollar or a digital euro that's issued and controlled directly by the central bank.
And look, this is not some sci-fi thing that's decades away. This is happening right now. Okay, so while only about 5% of countries have actually launched one, like Nigeria and Jamaica, look at the rest. A quarter of the world's economies, including giants like China and India, are already in the pilot phase. And a massive 60%, including the US, are deep in development and research. The shift is already happening.
And so, this brings our entire journey full circle, right back to that fundamental question of trust, but with a totally modern twist. Think about it. As money stops being a physical thing you can hold in your hand and becomes nothing more than pure information, a huge new question comes up. Who do we trust more? The governments and institutions that we've relied on for centuries, or the complex code and algorithms that are building this new digital world? That is the question that all of us are going to have to answer.